We're in a slightly cleared out corner of my studio office. I'm going to talk about three-dimensional vector product and cosine vector product retrieval systems. Try to give a better idea of the three-dimensionality, the polydimensionality of systems that have more than two descriptors. We're going to use three here. Larger systems might have 500,000, several million descriptors. Those are several million dimensions, but the system works the same whether it's 3 or a million. Here we're talking about a three-dimensional model, a little bit bumped up from our two-dimensional work. We're going to be using this three-dimensional construct made out of glorious PVC pipes. We have our old friends science running this way, an x-axis. We've got art running on the y-axis over here, and we've added a z-axis, a third descriptor, a third dimension to our model running here. They're all scaled from 0, the origin point, to 10 in 6-inch increments. So zeros on the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the same on each of these, 0 to 10. We're going to use a lovely piece of 1/4 inch green rope to represent the vector for the request. To do this, we're going to do something very similar to what we did in the two-dimensional graph. We're going to run out on art 6 because the person's not particularly, or maybe I should say not especially interested in art, just art when it's being used to do something with science. So they're going to ask for 6, somewhat more than nothing, but not all the way up to 10. So 6 is here. Then science is rated at 9, very high. Science is right here. If we come out on a line for science, we're over at 6, but we have to come up. We're going to be just about here. And this would look like what we had on our two-dimensional graph. But now we have to maintain this point on the floor, but we have to be able to lengthen the vector some. We're adding the third dimension here, and we're coming up to 10, which is about here. So we came in 2 dimensions to a point on the floor about where my foot is, and then we have to come up to 10, which is about here. I happen to have a little marker so that we can remember where we were with the request. And that's going to sit right over that point, and it's going to sit up here at a height of 10. So we're right over that point. We're right up at 10 more or less here. I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to hope that we can do it without the thing falling apart. What we've done in the past for this exercise is actually have people in the class hold on to different pieces of rope. However, since it's COVID time and since the course is always online anyway, we're trying to do what we can. I don't actually have a special effects budget, so this is the best we can do for a sketch. So our request is sitting not in a two-dimensional space as it did before, but in a three-dimensional space. It's out 10 for science, and that's combined with the out 6 for art, and then it's raised up to 10 for funding. Puts it right about there. the next document we're going to deal with, or the first document we're going to deal with, document number 1. Person's also interested in funding primarily, hardly interested in art at all, but just thought they would throw in some interest in art, very interested in science. So they're going to be doing only 2 for art. So here's our nice piece of 1/8" orange rope for the first document. We're going to come out 2 along the art axis. 2 is right here, which happens handily to be along this seam in the floor. So 2 here, and person's very interested in science. Get around the document here. That's a problem in 3 dimensions. And we're going to come out to 10 here. So we're running along this seam like a grid line. We come out to 10, and then we come up 10 because the person's very interested in funding. That's their primary interest. We've got a representation for that document. I'm going to line it up over the 2 grid line. Move our model around a little bit, and we're over 2, up over 10, and up 10. So we have our request sitting out at this point in space. We have our first document sitting out at this point in space. They look kind of close. Then we have a third document. That document, a second document, a third point in our space. The person who wrote this book was not particularly interested in funding. They were very interested in the overlap between the way science is done and the way art is done. So that book really doesn't have much to do about funding. It's only a little bit, and that's more a discussion of less funding for the arts than for science. So it's not about how to get grants, how to write grants. So that's only going to be up 2. And the 0 point, it goes up on the funding dimension, just 2. Getting a little crowded in here, I know. But it's a lot about science, a lot about art. In fact, it's 10 about art. So that's going to be running along this line in the floor. And it's almost that much about science. It's about 9 on science. And that's lined up pretty much with that document. So we're going to have this one right about here. So, as you could see in the 2-dimensional piece that we did earlier, you could eyeball with 2 dimensions. Looks like this one is closer. You could even measure them. And this is in effect what we did when we took found the length of the hypotenuse and did the hypotenuse over A and B. So in this 3-dimensional space, the distance from document 1 to the request is exactly 2 feet. And from document 2 to the request is just about 4 feet. So our eyeballs and a measuring device confirm one another. But you can imagine now, what if you had 15 or 20 or 30 more documents, and some of them are here, and as would be the case in almost any system, most of the documents would be way down here, kind of close to 0, because they don't have anything to do with art or science or funding. as you get more and more documents, the distinction between documents becomes less and less easy to see with the eyeball, or even just measuring hypotenuse, making use of the hypotenuse to measure the sort of absolute distance from the document to the crest. Now, the other thing we did was making use of the angle down at the origin, and we're going to do that in the same way here when we get to demonstrating what's happening with the mathematics. We're going to be looking at this angle, which at this point is like that big, looks like maybe 30 degrees. This angle is somewhat bigger, maybe something close to 45 degrees, just by my guess. I hope this gives you some sense of the dimensionality.